It's said that the best defense is a good offense. And in a world where false news and alternative facts come flying at us daily, author and critical thinker Christopher DiCarlo's new book, 6 Steps to Better Thinking: How to Disagree and Get Along, offers some practical skills for both. A former TVO Best lecturer, he joins us now for more. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you very much.
I mean, the timing of your book is stupendous. When did you start writing this book?
About a year ago, I figured it was time to set out the basic critical thinking skill set so that everybody, no matter who they are, could learn them and then be able to apply them well.
And in the introduction to 6 Steps to Better Thinking, you write, "It's time to make facts and critical thinking sexy again."
Yes.
How did facts become unsexy?
They become unsexy when people, not to name names, to the south of us, take information and use them towards their own end by using pretzel logic and rhetoric.
What does that mean?
Pretzel logic is just twisting the truth. Hence the term, alternate facts have been invented to demonstrate that there's a level of what Stephen Colbert called truthiness to information. This is not the case. Information doesn't admit to degrees in that way. And so facts are solid pieces of information that we need to be able to discern carefully and then act accordingly.
And why are you the best person to write this book?
I don't know if I'm the best, but I think I'm very well experienced after having lectured for 20 years at various universities and written a number of books and engaged in public debates and dialogues and discussions and that sort of thing.
So what do you think is happening?
People are frustrated due to the inability to gain good jobs and resources and that sort of thing. So when people come along who tell them what they want to hear, it's like a person going to a psychic. A psychic doesn't have any powers. But for $40 a half an hour, they'll tell you exactly what you want to hear, and you'll feel good about that. Even though it has no relationship with reality whatsoever, it's going to make you feel good. That's how I think we got into this. We're feeling through issues rather than thinking.
And that's what you write in your book. And to help us, I guess, create a dialogue instead of speaking at each other, or not even speaking to each other, you write that an argument is like a house.
Correct.
How is an argument like a house?
So I tell all my students and wherever I give lectures that imagine what it is that you're trying to say and think about your main point, whatever that happens to be. You agree with gun control, you don't think there should be gun control, you're pro-abortion, anti-abortion. Whatever your conclusion is, that's your roof. So your conclusion is the thing you need to support, and you need solid walls, what in critical thinking we call premises, or the reasons why you hold a particular view. But those premises won't support that roof very well if they don't abide by universal foundational criteria that all premises have to abide by. And if they don't, the walls weaken and the roof comes crashing down.
What is some of that criteria?
First and foremost, there's consistency. If your premises are inconsistent, then your roof comes tumbling down. Mr. Trump said on the day of his inauguration, it did not rain. I mean, this is just simply factually wrong. He said the skies opened up and the sun shone down and God would not allow this. I mean, you've seen the clips many times. Well, he's just being inconsistent with the way the facts actually presented themselves. So his walls are weakened and they come down. Other criteria that act as foundations to our premises are things like parsimony or simplicity. If a simpler argument will do, the KISS principle, then so be it.
Make it simple, stupid, or something?
Keep it simple, stupid.
Okay, yeah.
Basically, relevance. You want to make sure your premises are relevant. You can't pull things just out of the air that have no connection to how it is you're trying to support your roof. Certainly things like reliability. Where did you get your information that you're using to support, those premises? And sufficiency. Are there enough premises in order to support those walls that in turn support your roof or your conclusion?
I mean, that's a lot of steps for a person who's being inundated with so much information. What do you think is the most, I guess, important criteria amongst all that?
Consistency is the mother of all criteria in critical thinking.
In the chapter where you lay out the factors that build strong arguments, you state that If it can be demonstrated that the premises of an argument have not been attained from reliable sources, it becomes quite easy to demonstrate their weakness and topple the argument. How does the seemingly untoppable persistence of the anti-vaccination movement fit into this assertion?
Right. The issues with the anti-vaxxers is that you've heard the statement, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And to me, that applies. That's extremely apropos with anti-vaxxers. They have a little bit of information, and then they run with that. And what happens is, you and I and the camera people and the producers here, we're all guilty of possessing what's called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the capacity to only look for information which is going to further confirm what you already believe, and you'll ignore the rest, sweep the rest under the carpet.
Why do we do that?
We do it because when we think we're right, we develop a sense of security about ourselves, control over our world, less guesswork, and that makes us feel great. And if people look to us as having valued opinions and whatnot, that gives us a level of status. So there's quite a bit of cognitive science at work here with critical thinking, and I touch on that somewhat throughout the book, where the feeling of being right fires all kinds of neurotransmitters that make us feel good about ourselves. So if I think I'm doing the very best for my child by not vaccinating them, all the information we can produce that demonstrates how safe vaccinations are going to be blocked by these kind of confirmation biased filters that will not allow that information to get through.
It's kind of like we're in our little bubble.
We are in our little bubble, yeah. But that's a dangerous bubble because we've seen the rise of measles, pertussis, rubella, all these types of things in California and places in Canada even as well, because parents, and I sympathize with them, they want to do, they're thinking they're doing what's best for their children. But it's not working out that way. In fact, you're putting them at considerable risk by not having them vaccinated. One of my biggest beefs about the whole anti-vax movement is that whenever it's on television like this, nobody ever shows the information of the basics of vaccination. How did it begin with Lister and Pasteur and whatnot? How did they realize that you can be safeguarded against diseases through vaccination? And then let's look at what the World Health Organization and the CDC has to say about the odds of the dangers from vaccinations.
So you think that by showing instead of telling, people will be able to make up an informed mind.
Exactly.
An informed opinion.
Yeah.
Speaking of the anti-vaccination movement, you mentioned actress Jenny McCarthy, I guess who could be called the face of it. Right. You mentioned her a lot in the book. Why is that?
I think Jenny McCarthy has done a lot to demonstrate the dangers of having a little bit of knowledge. She's guilty of what's known as the post-Hoc fallacy. Because her child exhibited symptoms labeled as autism at the time, after the child was vaccinated, she concluded that the vaccination had to be the cause. Whatever came after that vaccination, namely the child's symptoms, that vaccination had to have been the cause. This is faulty reasoning. This is flawed reasoning. She's committed a fallacy, an error of reasoning. There could have been 1,000 things that could have, influenced the way in which that child developed. She pinpointed one aspect after Googling online, Andrew Wakefield's paper that has since been pulled, and he's since been stripped of his...
He was from the UK?
Yes, and he's been stripped of his title as doctor because it was found that his data was fudged and influenced, compromised by money and other types of interests and whatnot. So when people looked at Jenny McCarthy, and at that time Jim Carrey, her husband at that time, they look at this person who's in the limelight a lot and think, well, why would she be saying this if it wasn't true? And her personal experience is good enough for me. And so it touches on your care for your children, which is pretty much your #1 concern. If you have kids, you become like #2, and the children become everything. Well, you want what's best for your children. Well, Jenny McCarthy is saying this. Well, there's got to be some truth in that. She wouldn't be lying to everybody. No, she's just misinformed.
Do you think that by giving her a platform, it validates what she's saying?
It can. It certainly can. It depends on how discerning the viewers are. People might say, well, why would she be on? if she didn't have a set of valid points to demonstrate. But if we don't allow that, then it looks like, well, big media, you know, the establishment, you're suppressing information. It's a conspiracy. Well,
and she's not the only celebrity. There's lots of celebrities that champion causes.
Oh, yes.
How much attention should we give them?
Not much, right? Like we shouldn't give anti-vaxxers much. And I am fairly outspoken on this. It's not as though...
But what about other celebrities who are championing different causes?
We need to have sound reasoning skills demonstrated with the appropriate information. So if it's anti-vaxxers, the first thing we have to begin with is, what are vaccinations? How are they created? What is the history of vaccinations? What is their success rate around the world? Okay? And then what are the issues that have developed over the years? So everybody can get that information and hopefully make a more reasoned decision as opposed to somebody's endorsement of it, right? I don't drive a Lincoln because Matthew McConaughey's been driving one, you know? I'd like his six-pack, but I'm not going to buy...
Me too.
I'm not going to buy a Lincoln because he tells me it's a good car.
Yeah.
Right?
In your chapter, you write about bias, and in that chapter, you write, it is important to remember that as humans, we were emotional beings long before we were rational beings. And so it should not be surprising then that we often react to information emotionally first and then must think rationally about it afterwards. How does this affect how you teach critical thinking? Right.
So the students who come to me or the businesses that I go into through my private consulting business, basically they have to understand that we have a kind of a hardwired precondition. Our limbic system, the central part of our brain where the amygdala is found, tends to react emotionally to information much more quickly than the prefrontal cortex, the later developed part of the brain that allows us to step back from our emotions and try to think more critically and more rationally. So students and clients alike need to understand that emotions are a natural part of understanding. We are going to be biased emotionally. And in the book,
why is that so hard for us to admit?
I don't know if it has to do with self-delusion. We're not that good looking, right? We're not that great in bed. But if we think we are, then we get through the day that much better, and we can go on with our lives no matter how we define ourselves. So teaching people about biases, you know, what I call the bias check, looking in the mirror and literally trying to figure out what influences, what constraints have led you to this point in time to think now the way you do about this topic. And it causes people to kind of basically reverse engineer and wonder, why do I think this way about this particular topic? If I can get people to do that, I think we'll go a long way towards getting people to think a little more reflectively about what they think, and then how that might influence how they behave as well.
How are things such as ethnicity, religion, and family upbringing barriers to critical thinking?
They're not so much barriers. We can work through these, but I see what you mean. If, like I was raised in a predominantly Italian household, and it's uncanny when I get together with old friends from our hood, and we start, it's uncanny how their accents come out that never were there, and that, you know, they talk about what it was like doing down peppers on the barbecue and making giardiniera.
You get each other.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And so it's surprising how quickly that ethnicity will come back. Family upbringing, the way in which we were raised and the types of rules we had within the household. Religious beliefs are very difficult to reconcile, especially if people are passionate about their faith. And if their religious beliefs, let's just say, you know, if we look at the aspect of homosexuality, if I'm a fundamentalist Christian and I believe God wants a man to marry a woman because of Leviticus, you know, passages within Leviticus and Deuteronomy, that no man shall lay down with another man, it is an abomination before God, and my son turns out to be gay, then in my mind, I'm thinking he's defying me, he's defying his community, and he's defying his God by making that choice.
So it clouds the judgment.
It does. But what science tells us is that he's not choosing that. I never chose to be heterosexual. that's how I ended up being. So what I'm trying to get across in the book is to have people think a little more reflectively about their hardened beliefs and the types of constraints through which those beliefs have been formed, to be able to be a little more compassionate and a little more reasonable in judging the actions of others, to try to step back from themselves, as it were, and then to go about ways of reconciling that. I'm not saying you have to give up your religion. What a person's religious belief is none of my business, provided they're not harming anybody, right? But that would be the same for non-religious beliefs as well. As long as you're not harming people and you're abiding by the laws and you're living your life, and that's what we really want to do, right? We just want to kind of get along and have good lives, all right? How are we doing that if we're condemning our own children to be excommunicated, ostracized from the community? And in the minds of some of the true believers, they will go to hell. You know, they will suffer eternal damnation for their life choice. And that's where I'm going to take some issue, because those particular beliefs are not using the critical thinking skills as well as they could to try to reconcile.
You write about a gentleman called Solomon Asch. Who is he?
So a professor who studied how peer pressure can influence people's decisions even when that person knows that that decision is wrong.
What did he find out?
So basically, he would get a bunch of people in a room, but there would only be one test subject. All the other people would be in on it. And he would show a series of 3 lines. And those 3 lines would be presented, and then a page would come in with another line, and does that line match A, B, or C? And the first 3, they go, oh yeah, that one matches line A, that one, oh yeah, that's B, that's C. And then the 4th try, it was clear that it matched one of the lines. I mean, it was just obvious, but every person down the row said, no, it doesn't match any of them.
Really?
No, it doesn't match any of them. It doesn't match. And when it got to the test subject, he said, no, it doesn't match any of them. Just so he would not have to go against what the others were saying. So sometimes we get pressured into conforming and not wanting to go against, you know, the current way of thinking for whatever reasons.
How does the concept of fake news mesh with Solomon Asch's experiment?
Well, with fake news, to me, that is, if you happen to abide by the fake news, if you happen to believe it, then it's fulfilling your confirmation bias. So then you're just accepting it. And if you're not, and you try to point out that, wait a minute, this is not real, this is fake news, a tactic that's often used is it'll be turned around against you for trying to attack the information that we happen to believe. How dare you do this? You know, you're the one who's the problem, not us. And that's how people insulate their views from attack. And we can't have that kind of insulation. All information should be open to discussion. If it's out there, then we should be able to discuss it. And we should be able to discuss it without hating the other person. We've forgotten the art of disagreement. We've forgotten how to disagree and get along.
You write that you must ask yourself where you get your information. Do you get it mostly from online sources, television, newspapers, magazines, the schoolyard, your neighbor? Be aware that all information, no matter which type, comes to you already biased, including this very book. There is no such thing as bias-neutral information. So how should we deal with the biases that we encounter in every piece of information we encounter?
Right, so we need to be media literate. We need to teach ourselves that no matter where we get the information, there's going to be some kind of a slant or bias or even a vested interest to that. You know the various newspapers that are out there in this city. You know the Sun, you know the Star, you know the Post, right? You know the Globe. And you know they tend to have left to centrist to right-wing types of editorial, you know, input on those. So when people read information from newspaper sources, magazines, that sort of thing, they watch it on television, they get it online, they have to dig into the sources from which that information was attained to make sure it's been corroborated. This is the hallmark of journalism. You would have been taught this. I don't know what school you went to.
Ryerson.
Ryerson, I've taught there many times. And so you need to have information corroborated. If you don't, then it just becomes tweeting, right? It just becomes blogging at that point. And there's no real scrutiny, and there's no real value to that type of information because the process in which it was gained wasn't done in a reliable fashion. And so we need to arm ourselves with these mental skills to be able to hold information at bay until we've got it corroborated.
I think people are looking at news now more as entertainment as opposed to information.
Well, there's so much of it in so many different forms now that, you know, the big three networks in the States, you know, those days are gone. You know, a lot of people get their news from The Daily Show now, right?
Right. Why did you cite Bruce Springsteen's song, Born in the USA, as an example of how important context is?
Context, you need to understand the context in which information is housed. Otherwise, you can act too quickly on that information, and that's unfair to those people who presented that information. The cornerstone of critical thinking, as I mentioned in the book, is fairness. If you and I abide by those rules fairly, we're actually going to accomplish more than if we try to take an advantage of the other person. With context and the Bruce Springsteen song, I Was Born in the USA, I remember the summer of 1984 when that song came out, there was a presidential candidacy, and Ronald Reagan was running against, I think it was Mondale, and he adopted Bruce Springsteen's song, Born in the USA, because it's an
American anthem.
It's an American anthem, you know? But it's not. It's not. It's a scathing satire on the American way of treating young soldiers who were brought into the military, sent to Vietnam, basically told to go kill a bunch of people, and then when they brought them home, they were despised largely by a public who no longer supported them, and there was no safety net to help these soldiers who were suffering from PTSD and unemployment and all kinds of other issues. So it was a scathing commentary on that aspect of America. And of course, Reagan's people didn't listen to the song too carefully, didn't read the lyrics.
They probably just saw the video because we were talking about the video. It's a big flag, an American flag. How much responsibility should an artist like Bruce Springsteen take for the ease with which his song can be interpreted or misinterpreted?
None.
Excuse me.
None. He gets to say whatever he wants because he's an artist, and if we, the public, screw that up, that's on us. That's our fault. He just read the lyrics. It's very clear that it's a scathing attack on an aspect of American history, and he did an excellent job.
What is Godwin's Law?
Godwin's Law is basically if you and I were online and we were commenting back and forth about something we felt very passionately about, Godwin's Law says the longer you and I have a discussion, the more likely one of us is going to refer to the other as a Nazi. So,
what does that say about us?
Yeah, so that, you know, it's called playing the Nazi card, or ad Hitlerium, I think is what it's referred to, where people just basically, you know, well, that's just what the Nazis would have done, you know. No, you're not a Nazi, I'm not a Nazi. This is silliness to call somebody that. We have to keep things serious, and we have to, you know, have discussions in a respectful manner. As Jon Stewart said, you know who was like Hitler? Hitler. That's it. Yeah. Hitler.
What is the sororities argument?
Yeah, the sororities argument is Latin for heap, and I use it as a tool to be able to help us better understand things like the abortion issue, or whenever there are incremental changes. So there are three schools of thought with abortion. The conservatives, who think sperm touches egg, don't touch it. There are the legalists. Baby leaves birth canal or cesarean, it now has all legal rights. And the gradualists, somewhere along conception to delivery, it becomes alive, and you shouldn't really impinge upon those rights. The sororities paradox is, imagine that we're going to build a heap, but we're just going to, you know, build a heap with grains of rice, one grain at a time. And I keep adding the grains and keep adding the grains and keep adding the grains. At some point, you're gonna say, okay, that's a heap. But the cameraman might say, no, it's not a heap yet. And I might say, no, it was a heap, you know, half an hour ago. So who's right? So it refers to a gray area I call the umbra, or a shadowy area I call the umbra of becoming, where there's a level of subjectivity as to when it's gone from non-heap to heap, and then that area in between. So it's a tool to be able to better situate ourselves in terms of where we stand in terms of, say, the abortion issue.
And finally, can you give me an example? Because I'm thinking there must be a time when your thinking on a subject was changed as a result of critical thinking.
Right, right. Certainly in terms of driving. When, just coming here today on the 401, people have habits of driving. And I do not want to become that person who tailgates, who makes other people nervous and whatnot. And so I've decided that within the realm of driving, I was able to use critical thinking to come up with a set of rules that will allow the greatest amount of free flow of traffic during congestion. And I've actually talked to the Ministry of Transportation about these 3 rules, and we're trying to maybe get them implemented. But it requires cooperation. It requires everybody to do the same type of thing, that you have to leave a certain amount of space and you have to be considerate. In Japan, when somebody wants to come in, they let them come in, and then the person flashes their hazards twice. That's thank you. Right? And we seem to be more kind of American, more kind of like, I was here first.
You wait your turn.
You'll wait your turn. Where we all want to get to where we're going.
Yeah.
So I'm finding a collaborative approach, just in driving alone, demonstrates the skills of critical thinking.
Christopher, thank you so much for being here and for this great guide, 6 Steps to Better Thinking.
Well, thank you for having me.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.